In the hushed mahogany-paneled courtroom, a verdict was about to be rendered on more than just paternity. It was a verdict on love loss, and a lie that had shattered a billionaire's world. On one side sat Marcus Thorne, a titan of industry with eyes as cold as the fortune he commanded, publicly denying the child he was accused of fathering. On the other, a young woman named Chloe Evans clutching her baby, her face a mask of desperate hope. The world watched, convinced she was a gold digger. But they didn't know about the letter. A letter from beyond the grave penned by Marcus's late wife that was about to silence the entire court and expose a secret so profound it would redefine the very meaning of family. The air in courtroom 4B of the New York County Supreme Court was thick enough to be bottled and sold as a nerve agent. It was a cocktail of stale coffee, expensive perfume, and palpable tension. Every seat was filled. Reporters lined the back wall, their pens poised like daggers, ready to carve up the loser for the morning headlines. This wasn't just a paternity suit. It was a public execution of reputation, and the whole world had a front row seat. At the defendant's table sat Marcus Thorne. Even in the unflattering fluorescent light, he looked like he'd been sculpted from granite and ambition. His suit, a bespoke creation from Savile Row, probably cost more than the judge's car. He was the founder and CEO of Ethereum Dynamics, a tech behemoth that had reshaped global communication. He was a king in a world of his own making, but today he was a man cornered. His face was a stoic mask, but his hands clasped on the polished table were white-knuckled. Beside him, his lawyer Gideon Sharp exuded a predatory calm. Sharp was a shark known for legally dismembering his opponents with a chillingly polite smile. Across the aisle was the claimant Chloe Evans. She looked small and fragile in the cavernous room, a stark contrast to Marcus's imposing figure. Dressed in a simple, modest dress, she held a sleeping baby in her arms. The infant, a boy of about 6 months, with a wisp of dark hair, was oblivious to the storm raging around him. His name was Leo. Chloe's lawyer, Anna Petrova, was a young, fiercely intelligent woman from a pro bono firm. She had the fire of a true believer in her eyes, a stark contrast to Sharp's cold calculation. "Mr. Sharp, you may continue your cross-examination," said Judge Maria Hernandez. She was a formidable woman in her late 50s, with a reputation for suffering no fools. Her gaze swept across the courtroom, a silent command for order. Gideon Sharp rose smoothly. "Thank you, Your Honor." He turned to Chloe, his voice deceptively gentle. "Ms. Evans, let's be perfectly clear for the court. You claim that this child, Leo, is the biological son of my client, Mr. Marcus Thorne." Chloe's voice trembled slightly, but she met his gaze. "Yes, he is. And you are asking this court to legally recognize Mr. Thorne as the father and grant child support commensurate with his considerable income." Sharp let the words hang in the air, painting a clear picture of motive. "I am asking the court to make him acknowledge his son." Chloe corrected her voice, gaining strength. She adjusted the baby in her arms. "Leo deserves to know his father." Sharp smirked. "A noble sentiment. But let's talk facts, shall we? You worked for a brief period at a charitable foundation established by Mr. Thorne's late wife, Isabella. Correct?" "Yes. The Isabella Rossi Foundation for the Arts. I was an administrative assistant." "So you were aware of the Thorne family's wealth. You were aware of the tragic passing of Mrs. Thorne approximately 18 months ago." "I was aware that Isabella was a kind, wonderful person who is missed every day," Chloe said, her eyes flashing with defiance. "Her death was a tragedy that left Mr. Thorne a grieving widower. A very, very wealthy grieving widower," Sharp pressed. "Tell me, Ms. Evans, when did this alleged liaison with Mr. Thorne take place?" Chloe's face flushed. It wasn't a liaison. It was complicated. "Complicated?" Sharp pounced. "That's not a date on the calendar, Ms. Evans. Was it a one-night stand? An affair? Did my client, a man still deep in mourning for the love of his life, suddenly seek comfort in the arms of a junior employee from his late wife's charity?" The insinuation was ugly and effective. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Marcus Thorne didn't flinch, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. The story sold itself a vulnerable billionaire, a calculating young woman, a moment of weakness. Anna Petrova stood up. Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is badgering the witness and making speculative, inflammatory statements. Sustained. Judge Hernandez said, her eyes fixed on Sharp. Ask a question, Mr. Sharp, or sit down. Sharp gave a slight bow. My apologies. Ms. Evans, my client states unequivocally that he has never had intimate relations with you. Are you calling him a liar? Chloe looked from Sharp's smug face to Marcus's cold, impassive one. For the first time, a tear escaped her eye and traced a path down her cheek. Mr. Thorne knows the truth, she whispered, her voice cracking. He's just refusing to see it. Marcus finally moved. He leaned toward Gideon Sharp and whispered something. Sharp nodded, a grim satisfaction on his face. He turned back to the judge. Your Honor, Sharp announced, his voice booming with confidence. We have presented sworn affidavits and testimony. But to put this baseless and predatory claim to rest once and for all, my client has agreed to a DNA test. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. This was the moment of truth. Anna Petrova's face paled slightly, but she recovered quickly. We welcome a DNA test, Your Honor. It will prove our case. Chloe, however, looked terrified. She clutched baby Leo tighter, a silent prayer on her lips. She knew the truth was on her side, but she also knew the man she was up against. Marcus Thorne didn't lose. He didn't bend. And he was looking at her and the baby in her arms, not with recognition, but with a chilling, absolute contempt. Judge Hernandez banged her gavel. It is so ordered. A court-mandated paternity test will be performed on Mr. Thorne and the child Leo Evans by an independent laboratory. We will reconvene in 1 week to hear the results. Court is adjourned. As the room erupted into a frenzy of chatter, Marcus Thorne stood, straightened his tie, and walked out without a single glance back. He left behind a terrified young woman, a bewildered baby, and a question that hung in the air like a death sentence. What if the DNA test proved him right? To understand the ice in Marcus Thorne's veins, you had to understand the fire that had once been extinguished from his life. His home, a sprawling penthouse overlooking Central Park, was less a home than a monument to loss. It was a masterpiece of modern architecture with floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, and a collection of contemporary art worth a small country's GDP. But it was silent, deathly silent. It was a gilded cage, and Marcus was its sole grieving prisoner. It hadn't always been this way. When Isabella was alive, the penthouse had been a home. Her laughter echoed in the halls, her half-finished paintings leaned against the walls, and the scent of the peonies she adored filled every room. Isabella Rossi was not just his wife. She was his anchor, his muse, his entire world. They had met in college. He was a driven, socially awkward computer science prodigy, and she was a brilliant, effervescent art history major. She saw past his reserved exterior and found the passionate, visionary man within. He, in turn, was mesmerized by her light, her effortless ability to find beauty in everything. Theirs was a love story for the ages, the logician and the artist, a perfect complementary whole. As Ethereum Dynamics grew into a global empire, their love only deepened. But amidst the private jets, the galas, and the astronomical success, a quiet sorrow had taken root. They wanted a child more than anything. For 2 years they tried. They endured the cold clinical world of fertility clinics, the monthly cycle of hope and despair. Finally, they received the devastating diagnosis. Marcus had testicular cancer. The news hit him like a physical blow. His own body, the vessel of his formidable intellect, had betrayed him. The prognosis for his survival was excellent, but the aggressive chemotherapy required would leave him sterile. Permanently. Isabella was his rock. She held him through the fear, the sickness, and the grueling treatments. Before the chemotherapy began, on the advice of their doctors, they made a decision born of hope. They underwent several rounds of IVF, creating and freezing a batch of healthy embryos. It was their insurance policy for a future they were fighting for. Our little snow babies, Isabella called them. her smile tinged with a fragile optimism. "Waiting for us when we get through this." Marcus beat the cancer. He emerged from the ordeal scarred but alive, his focus sharper than ever. He poured his energy back into his company while Isabella channeled hers into building their life back. The frozen embryos were their shared secret promise of a family to come. But fate, it seemed, was not done with them. 15 months after his remission, Isabella was driving back from a charity event upstate. A drunk driver crossed the center line. The call came at 2 a.m., shattering Marcus's world into a million irreparable pieces. The year and a half since her death had been a blur of work and numb silence. Grief was a physical presence in his penthouse. It sat with him at his empty dining table. It lay beside him in their cold, king-sized bed. He functioned, he led his company, he made billions, but he did not live. The man in the courtroom, the cold, unfeeling titan, was a shell. The real Marcus Thorne had died on the highway with Isabella. The frozen embryos, their snow babies, became a painful reminder of a future that had been stolen. They were locked away in a cryogenic facility, a testament to a dream that was now impossible. He couldn't bear to think of them, much less use them. A child without Isabella was not a future. It was a torture. When Chloe Evans's claim landed on his desk, delivered by a stunned Gideon Sharp, Marcus didn't feel anger or confusion. He felt a profound, weary disgust. It was a desecration of Isabella's memory. He, the man who couldn't have children. He, the man who hadn't touched another woman since his wife's last kiss. The claim was so absurd, so patently false, that it could only be one thing: a vile, opportunistic shakedown. He told Sharp to crush it, use any means necessary. He didn't care about the money. He cared about the principle. This woman, this stranger, was trying to graft her own sordid story onto his and Isabella's. She was a parasite attempting to feed on his grief. So when he agreed to the DNA test, it wasn't a gamble. It was a checkmate. The lab results would come back proving he was not the father. Chloe Evans would be exposed as a fraud and a liar, and he could return to the cold, quiet sanctity of his grief. The test was his weapon, and he had no doubt it would deliver the killing blow. He was sterile. The science was absolute. There was no other possibility. Chloe Evans was not a parasite. She was a quiet, unassuming young woman from Ohio who had moved to New York with dreams of working in the art world. She was adrift in the massive, indifferent city until she found a lifeline, a job posting for an administrative assistant at the Isabella Rossi Foundation for the Arts. The foundation was Isabella's passion project, a nonprofit dedicated to funding arts education for underprivileged children. The moment Chloe walked into the foundation's vibrant, sun-drenched office, she knew she was in the right place. It was an oasis of creativity and hope, a direct reflection of its founder. And then she met Isabella. Isabella Thorne was nothing like the society wives Chloe had read about in magazines. She was warm, down to earth, and genuinely interested in everyone who worked for her. She knew the names of the janitor's children and always remembered Chloe's favorite type of tea. She would often work from the foundation's office, dressed in jeans and a paint-splattered sweater, her infectious laugh echoing down the hallway. A friendship bloomed, an unlikely one, between the billionaire's wife and the junior assistant. Isabella saw in Chloe a deep well of kindness and an integrity that was rare. Chloe, for her part, idolized Isabella. She was everything Chloe aspired to be: graceful, brilliant, and compassionate. About a year into Chloe's employment, her mother fell gravely ill back in Ohio. The medical bills were astronomical, and Chloe was drowning in debt and despair, flying back and forth every weekend. She tried to hide her struggles, but Isabella noticed the change immediately. One afternoon, Isabella called Chloe into her office. "Talk to me, Chloe," she said, her voice full of genuine concern. "What's going on?" Tears streaming down her face, Chloe confessed everything: the mounting bills, the fear of losing her mother, the feeling of utter helplessness. Isabella listened patiently, her hand resting gently on Chloe's arm. The next day, an anonymous donation paid off all of her mother's medical debt. It was sent through a third-party legal firm, but Chloe knew. She knew it was Isabella. When she tried to thank her, Isabella just smiled. "We take care of our own here," she said simply. "Your mother needs you. Go be with her. Your job will be here when you get back." That act of profound generosity forged an unbreakable bond of loyalty in Chloe's heart. Isabella wasn't just her boss. She was her savior, her mentor, her friend. After Marcus's recovery from cancer, Chloe saw the immense relief and joy in Isabella. She spoke often of their dream of having a family of the snow babies waiting for them. There was a new light in her eyes, a hope for the future that was infectious. But Chloe also noticed something else. Something Isabella tried to hide. Sometimes Isabella would press a hand to her chest after a fit of laughter, her breath catching for a moment. She would occasionally get dizzy spells, blaming them on low blood sugar. Chloe, worried, once suggested she see a doctor. Isabella waved it off with a smile. "Just tired, honey. Planning a fundraising gala is more exhausting than a marathon." In reality, Isabella was hiding a terrible secret, one she hadn't even shared with Marcus. She didn't want to burden him after his own health scare. A routine checkup had revealed a congenital heart condition. One that had been asymptomatic her whole life, but was now showing signs of worsening. The doctors had been stark: a pregnancy would be exceptionally high risk. Carrying a child to term could kill her. The news was a cruel twist of fate. They had survived cancer. They had their embryos. Their path to a family was finally clear, only for this new, insurmountable roadblock to appear. The idea of using a traditional surrogate felt cold and impersonal to Isabella. She couldn't bear the thought of a stranger carrying her and Marcus's child. She needed someone she knew, someone she trusted implicitly, someone with a good heart. Her eyes, full of a desperate secret plan, fell on Chloe Evans. The conversation that changed everything took place 3 months before Isabella's death. She invited Chloe to her penthouse for tea, a rare and intimate invitation. The apartment was breathtaking, but Chloe felt a strange undercurrent of melancholy beneath the opulence. They sat on a plush white sofa overlooking Central Park. Isabella was uncharacteristically nervous, her hands fiddling with her teacup. "Chloe," she began, her voice soft, "I'm going to ask you something, and it's going to sound insane, but I need you to hear me out. There's no one else I can trust with this." Chloe listened, her heart pounding as Isabella laid her soul bare. She spoke of her heart condition, the doctor's grim warnings, and the crushing realization that she could never safely carry their child. She spoke of Marcus, of his deep desire for a family, and of her fear that if she were gone, he would wall himself off from the world forever. "He's been through so much," Isabella said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "His work, his drive. It's a shield. If he loses me, he'll use it as a fortress. He'll never let anyone in again. He'll never have the family we dreamed of." And then came the impossible request. "We have embryos, Chloe. Mine and Marcus's. Our little snow babies. I want to ask you if you would carry one for us. For me." Chloe was stunned into silence. The scale of what Isabella was asking was immense. To be a surrogate. To carry her friend's child. It was a life-altering, body-altering, soul-altering proposition. "Isabella, I don't know what to say," Chloe stammered. "I know it's a lot." Isabella rushed on her words, tumbling out in a wave of desperation and hope. "We would take care of everything, of course. The best doctors, legal contracts to protect you, financial compensation that would ensure you are set for life. But this isn't about that. I'm asking you this because I trust your heart. I know you would cherish and protect this baby while it grew because you know what it means to us." She then revealed the final, most secret part of her plan. "And I don't want to tell Marcus. Not yet." Chloe was aghast. "Not tell him, Isabella? You can't do that? Please just listen." Isabella pleaded. "He's so worried about me as it is. If I tell him about my heart and then propose this, he'll veto it immediately. He would never risk putting a friend in a position of responsibility like this. He'd see it as a burden, not a gift. I want to wait until you're pregnant, until it's real. Then we can tell him together. We'll present him with a miracle. He won't be able to say no to our baby." It was a flawed, reckless plan born of love and fear. Chloe saw the dangers, the potential for disaster. But she also saw the look in her friend's eyes, a desperate plea from a woman trying to build a lifeboat for her husband before her own ship sank. Isabella was trying to leave a piece of their love behind, a living legacy that would save Marcus from his own grief. For 2 weeks, Chloe agonized over the decision. Her head screamed no, but her heart, remembering Isabella's boundless generosity, whispered yes. How could she refuse the woman who had saved her family? How could she deny her dying friend's last, most fervent wish? She finally agreed. They did everything in secret. They used a discreet fertility clinic on Long Island, one where Isabella's name guaranteed privacy. The legal papers were drawn up by a private lawyer, not a firm associated with Marcus. The contracts were ironclad. Chloe was the gestational carrier for a known embryo belonging to Marcus and Isabella Thorne. Upon birth, all parental rights would be relinquished to the biological parents. The embryo transfer was successful on the first try. A week later, a blood test confirmed it. Chloe was pregnant. Isabella was ecstatic. They cried and hugged in the clinic's sterile waiting room. "It's happening," Isabella whispered, her hand on Chloe's still flat stomach. "Our miracle." They made a plan to tell Marcus together at a special dinner the following month, but that dinner never happened. 2 weeks later, Isabella was dead. Chloe was devastated, her grief compounded by the terrifying secret she now carried. The baby was no longer a gift for a happy couple. It was the orphaned legacy of a tragic love story. The legal contract was now a complex nightmare. One biological parent was dead, the other completely unaware of the child's existence. Her lawyer advised her to approach Marcus privately to explain the situation calmly. Chloe tried. She wrote letters, she called his office, but she was stonewalled at every turn by his protective assistants and lawyers. To them, she was just another name on a long list of people trying to get to the grieving billionaire. Her messages, which must have sounded insane without context, were likely deleted before they ever reached him. With the baby due and her options exhausted, she was left with no choice. Guided by Anna Petrova, who believed her incredible story, she filed the paternity suit. It was a desperate last-ditch effort to fulfill her promise to Isabella. She never wanted the money. She just wanted to give a father his son. And now, as she waited for the results of a DNA test she knew was doomed to fail, she feared her promise would be broken, and Isabella's last gift would be lost forever. The week of waiting was torture for everyone involved. For Chloe, it was a slow-motion nightmare. She and Anna Petrova went over the details again and again, but they always hit the same wall. The science of a standard paternity test was simple. It would compare Leo's DNA with Marcus Thorne's current DNA. It would look for a direct paternal link from a recent conception. It would not, and could not, account for an embryo created years ago before chemotherapy had ravaged Marcus's body. The test would come back negative. Anna prepared Chloe for the inevitable fallout, but there was no real way to brace for that kind of public humiliation. For Marcus, the week was a minor annoyance, a procedural delay in expunging a parasite from his life. He spent it locked in his office, driving Ethereum dynamics to new heights, the impending court date a mere footnote in his schedule. Gideon Sharp was supremely confident. "The lab is the best in the country," he'd assured Marcus. "Their results are unimpeachable. This will be over on Friday." The day arrived gray and drizzling, the sky weeping over Manhattan. The courtroom was even more packed than before, the atmosphere electric with anticipation. Marcus Thorne took his seat, his expression as unreadable as ever. Chloe entered looking pale and exhausted, holding Leo, who was awake and fussing. She sat down, her hands shaking. Judge Hernandez entered and the room fell silent. We are here to hear the results of the court-ordered paternity test in the matter of Evans versus Thorne. I have the certified report from OmniGen Laboratories right here. She held up a sealed manila envelope. The silence was so absolute that the sound of the paper tearing was like a gunshot. She scanned the document, her face neutral. Then she looked up, her gaze settling first on Chloe, then on Marcus. The report states, she began, her voice clear and steady, that the probability of paternity for the alleged father, Mr. Marcus Thorne, is 0%. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. It was followed by an explosion of sound. Reporters scrambled for the exit, frantically typing into their phones. 0%. Billionaire vindicated. Gold digger exposed. Chloe felt the world drop out from under her. The words hit her with physical force, knocking the breath from her lungs. It was what she had expected, but the finality of it was crushing. She looked down at Leo, whose big innocent eyes stared up at her, and a sob escaped her throat. Anna Petrova put a comforting hand on her shoulder, but her own face was ashen. They had lost. Gideon Sharp was on his feet, a triumphant, wolfish grin on his face. Your Honor, in light of this definitive scientific evidence, we move for an immediate dismissal of this fraudulent case. Furthermore, we will be filing a countersuit against Ms. Evans for defamation, emotional distress, and attempted fraud. This woman has maliciously dragged my client's good name through the mud in a disgusting and calculated ploy for money. She deserves to be punished to the fullest extent of the law. The judge's gavel banged sharply. Order! Order in this court! The noise subsided, but the verdict had already been delivered in the court of public opinion. Chloe Evans was a liar. Marcus Thorne allowed himself a small, grim smile of satisfaction. It was over. Justice, cold and precise, had been served. He stood to leave, ready to return to his silent, orderly life. Mr. Thorne, take your seat, Judge Hernandez commanded. Her voice was sharp, cutting through his bubble of victory. Marcus paused, surprised. He sat back down, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. The judge looked at Chloe, whose shoulders were shaking with silent sobs. There was no pity in the judge's eyes, but there was something else. A deep, searching curiosity. She had presided over hundreds of cases like this. She knew the look of a calculating liar, and she knew the look of desperate sincerity. And Chloe Evans, even in the face of damning scientific proof, looked more like the latter. Ms. Petrova, the judge said, her voice softer now. Your client's claim has been scientifically refuted. Do you have anything at all to say before I dismiss this case and consider Mr. Sharp's motion to countersue Anna? Petrova looked at Chloe, who was a crumpled mess. This was it, the end of the road. But then she remembered the package, the sealed, heavy envelope Chloe had given her when they first filed the case. Don't open this unless you have no other choice, Chloe had said. Unless they prove I'm a liar. It was Isabella's last wish. With nothing left to lose, Anna stood. Her voice, though strained, was firm. Yes, Your Honor, we do. She walked to her briefcase and pulled out a large cream-colored envelope sealed with wax bearing a delicate R insignia for Rossi. Your Honor, my client's story has always been that this child was not the product of an affair, but of a plan set in motion by the late Isabella Rossi-Thorne. A plan Mr. Thorne was not aware of. We have one final piece of evidence. A letter. Written by Isabella Thorne before her death. It is addressed to the presiding judge in any future matter concerning her child. Gideon Sharp shot up, laughing incredulously. Objection. This is an absurd, last-ditch theatrical ploy. A letter. How can we possibly authenticate this? It's hearsay of the highest order. It's a convenient fantasy cooked up by the defendant and her counsel. Judge Hernandez held up a hand, silencing him. Her eyes were fixed on the envelope. An R for Rossi. She remembered the name from the society pages, the beautiful, vibrant wife of the tech billionaire tragically lost. Ms. Petrova, the judge said slowly, on what grounds do you believe this letter to be authentic? My client received it from Mrs. Thorne herself. Your Honor, and inside, I am told, is a second smaller sealed envelope. It contains a single hair enclosed in a small plastic bag. A hair from Isabella Thorne's head. She told my client it was for a mitochondrial DNA test to prove the letter came from her. The courtroom, which had been buzzing with smug victory, fell utterly silent once more. This was a twist no one saw coming. Hair, a letter from a dead woman. It was the stuff of daytime television, not a high-stakes legal battle. Marcus Thorne froze. His icy composure finally cracked. Isabella. A letter from Isabella. It couldn't be. It was a trick. A cruel, desperate final lie. Judge Hernandez looked from the letter to Chloe's tear-streaked face to Marcus's suddenly pale one. Her judicial instincts, honed over decades, were screaming at her. This was not a simple case of fraud. This was something else entirely. Mr. Sharp, your objection is noted, but it is overruled, she said, her authority absolute. I will read the letter. In my chambers. The court will recess for 1 hour. She banged the gavel, and with a rustle of her robes she swept from the room, taking the mysterious letter with her. Marcus Thorne stared at the door. She had disappeared through the foundation of his cold, certain world, beginning to tremble beneath his feet. Judge Maria Hernandez sat alone in her quiet, book-lined chambers. The cacophony of the courtroom felt a world away. On her large oak desk lay the cream-colored envelope. It felt heavier than it should, weighted with unspoken secrets. For a long moment she simply looked at it. The wax seal with the R was elegant and personal. This was not the work of a forger. It felt authentic. With a silver letter opener she carefully broke the seal. Inside, as Anna Petrova had claimed, were 2 items. The first was a sheaf of thick, high-quality stationery filled with graceful, flowing handwriting. The second was a small sealed envelope labeled for DNA confirmation if needed. My love is not a lie. She opened the smaller envelope first. A single long strand of dark, lustrous hair was preserved inside a tiny Ziploc bag. It was a macabre but brilliant piece of legal foresight. She made a mental note to have it tested against the DNA on file from Isabella Thorne's estate, but her gut told her it would match. Then she turned to the letter. She put on her reading glasses, took a deep breath, and began to read. To the Honorable Judge. If you are reading this, then I am gone, and the world has gone terribly wrong for a person I love very much. Her name is Chloe Evans, and I fear she is being accused of terrible things. Please, before you pass judgment, allow me to tell you our story. Allow me, a woman who can no longer speak for herself, to speak the truth. My husband, Marcus Thorne, is the finest man I have ever known. He is brilliant. He is driven, and beneath an exterior, he guards so carefully he possesses a capacity for love that is boundless. That love was my greatest treasure. Our greatest dream, however, was to have a child. A dream that was almost stolen from us when Marcus was diagnosed with cancer. Judge Hernandez paused, her eyes widening slightly. This was not public knowledge. This was intimate. He beat it, thank God. He is a fighter. But the treatment left him sterile. Before the chemotherapy began, we preserved our future. We created and froze embryos from my eggs and his sperm. We called them our snow babies, waiting for the day we were ready. But fate, it seems, has a cruel sense of humor. Shortly after Marcus was given a clean bill of health, I was diagnosed with a congenital heart defect, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. My doctors told me that carrying a child to term would likely be fatal. To have come so far only to be stopped at the finish line. The irony was devastating. I could not tell Marcus. I could not bear to place another burden upon his shoulders after all he had endured. He would have forbidden me from even thinking about a child, choosing my safety above all else. But I knew him. I knew that without a family, without a piece of us to carry on his grief, would one day consume him entirely. And so I made a plan. A secret, desperate, and perhaps foolish plan, but one born of a love so deep I would defy death itself for him. I needed a surrogate. Not a stranger, but someone with a kind and gentle soul. Someone I trusted with the most precious thing in my world. I needed Chloe. Chloe Evans is a woman of profound integrity and kindness. I asked her to carry our child. Our embryo. I asked her to give Marcus and me the gift I no longer could. It was a tremendous burden to place upon her, but she agreed, not for money, but out of the goodness of her heart and her friendship to me. The baby she has brought into this world, the baby she is protecting, is not the product of an affair. He is the biological son of Marcus Thorne and Isabella Rossi-Thorne. Judge Hernandez had to stop and take off her glasses. Her own eyes were stinging. She looked at the wall at the framed degrees and accolades, but she saw none of it. She saw a dying woman writing a letter to the future, trying to protect her husband from a grief she knew would be all-consuming. She continued reading. The DNA test you have likely ordered will have come back negative. I knew it would. It will have tested Marcus's current DNA against the baby's, and it will find no match because Marcus is now sterile. The link is not in his body now. It is in the past. It is in embryo number 7 batch C, stored at the New Hope Fertility Clinic on Long Island, file number 881T. The genetic material is his from before the chemotherapy. Order the clinic's records. Test the baby's DNA against the sample from that specific embryo. There you will find your proof. There you will find Marcus's son. Please do not judge Chloe harshly. She is honoring my last wish. She is trying to deliver my final gift to my husband. A reason to live. A reason to love again. A piece of me, a piece of him to hold in his arms when he can no longer hold me. And if Marcus is in that room, I have one last thing to say. Not to you, Your Honor, but to him. The final part of the letter was written as if speaking directly to Marcus. My darling Marcus, my love, my life. If you are hearing this, I am so sorry. I'm sorry for the secrets, for the deception. I was just so afraid of leaving you alone. I know your work is your fortress, but I couldn't bear the thought of you living in it forever. I wanted to leave you with a key to open the door and let the sunshine in again. His name is Leo. I named him that because he is our Lionheart, strong and brave. He has your eyes, I hope, and my smile. Please, my love, don't push him away. He is not a reminder of what you've lost. He is proof of what we had. Love him. Let him love you. Our love story doesn't have to end with me. It can live on with him. Be a father, my Marcus. It is the one thing I know you will be even more brilliant at than building empires. I love you. Forever. Yours always. Isabella Judge. Maria Hernandez put the letter down on her desk. The silence in the room was profound. She sat for a full 10 minutes, composing herself, the weight of a dead woman's last will pressing down on her. This was no longer a paternity case. It was a testament, a tragedy, and a love story of heartbreaking proportions. She wiped a single tear from her cheek, stood up, and tucked the letter securely back into its envelope. It was time to return to the courtroom. It was time to deliver a verdict of the heart. The return of Judge Maria Hernandez to the bench was like a shift in atmospheric pressure. The buzzing and whispering in the gallery ceased instantly, replaced by a silence so profound it felt heavy, pressing down on everyone in the room. Her face, which had been stern and impatient before the recess, now held a deep, somber gravity. She carried the cream-colored envelope like a sacred text. Marcus Thorne watched her, the knot of dread in his stomach twisting into a cold, sharp thing. The world had tilted on its axis in the last hour. The name of a fertility clinic he hadn't thought about in years. The mention of a letter from his dead wife. These were impossible intrusions into the cold, orderly fortress of his grief. Beside him, Gideon Sharp shifted, whispering, "It's a bluff, a theatrical stunt. She can't admit it as evidence." But the usual confidence in Sharp's voice had been replaced by a thin, reedy uncertainty. Across the aisle, Chloe held Leo so tightly the baby stirred in his sleep. She watched the judge with a desperate, prayerful hope. This was it, the final fragile chance for Isabella's truth to be heard. Judge Hernandez settled in her chair, placed the letter on her desk, and surveyed the room. Her eyes paused on Sharp's anxious face, then on Chloe's tear-streaked one before finally landing with piercing intensity on Marcus Thorne. "We are reconvened," she stated, her voice even but resonant with a new authority. "I have reviewed the document presented by the claimant's counsel. Before I address its contents, let me be clear. The result of the DNA test stands. The science stating that Mr. Thorne could not have fathered this child through natural conception is based on his medical records, an undisputed fact." Gideon Sharp visibly relaxed, a smug "I told you so" look flashing across his face. He began to rise. "Then, Your Honor, as the science is undisputed, the science is not in question." "Mr. Sharp," the judge cut him off, her voice dropping to an icy calm that froze him in place. "What is in question is the context. And science without context can be the most misleading tool of all." She picked up the letter. "This document, a letter penned by the late Isabella Rossi-Thorne, provides that context, and I am going to read it into the official record." "Objection." Sharp yelled, truly panicked now. "Your Honor, this is outrageous. It's unverifiable. It is the very definition of hearsay. My client cannot cross-examine a ghost. This is a fabrication designed to manipulate the court." Judge Hernandez held up a hand, silencing him, not with her gavel, but with the sheer force of her will. "Mr. Sharp, your objection is not only noted, it is entirely predictable. However, this letter contained details specific medical diagnoses for both Mr. and Mrs. Thorne. Details of their fertility treatments, account numbers, and clinic names, all of which I have taken the liberty of preliminarily verifying that could not have been fabricated by Ms. Evans. This is not hearsay, Mr. Sharp. This is a testament, and this court will hear it." Her gaze swept the room. "And I will have absolute silence." With that, she began to read. As Isabella's words filled the silent courtroom, the atmosphere transformed. When the judge read about Marcus's cancer and his resulting sterility, a collective gasp went through the gallery. Marcus flinched as if the words themselves were a physical blow, a private agony now laid bare for the world. He saw not a courtroom, but the cold white walls of the oncologist's office, Isabella's hand squeezing his. When the judge spoke of Isabella's own secret heart condition, a wave of horrified murmurs rippled through the room, but Marcus heard nothing but the roaring in his own ears. "She never told me." The thought was a fresh stab of pain, sharper than anything he had felt since her death. She had carried this terrible burden alone to protect him. The magnitude of her love and her sacrifice was crashing down on him. He risked a glance at Chloe, who was weeping silently, not for herself, but for the friend whose secret pain she now understood. Then came the part about the plan, about choosing Chloe, about the embryo. Gideon Sharp's face was a mask of utter bewilderment. His meticulously constructed case, built on a foundation of irrefutable fact, was turning to sand washed away by a tide of love and desperation from beyond the grave. Finally, the judge's voice softened as she reached the last passage, the words intended for Marcus alone. "My darling Marcus, my love, my life." This was the breaking point. The voice of the judge became the voice of Isabella in his head, whispering to him as she had 1,000 times in the dark. The carefully constructed walls of his composure, already cracked and groaning, were obliterated. His hands came up to cover his face, a desperate, futile attempt to hide his unraveling, to hold himself together. A ragged sob was torn from his chest, a sound of such profound agony that it seemed to silence every heart in the room. "His name is Leo. He is our Lionheart. He is not a reminder of what you've lost. He is proof of what we had." The judge's voice choked slightly on the last few lines, but she finished, her own professionalism tested to its limit. When she was done, she placed the letter gently on her desk. The silence that followed was different now. It was sacred. It was stunned. It was reverent. All that could be heard was the sound of a powerful man weeping without restraint, stripped bare of his pride and his defenses. After a long moment, Judge Hernandez cleared her throat. Her own eyes were glistening. This court hereby retracts the preliminary finding based on the initial DNA test, she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. I am ordering the records from the New Hope Fertility Clinic be unsealed and entered as evidence. I am ordering a new DNA comparison matching the child Leo, not to Mr. Thorne's current genetic profile, but to the sample on file for embryo number 7, batch C. Though frankly at this point it is a formality. She looked directly at Marcus, her expression softening with a flicker of human compassion. This court is satisfied that the child Leo is the biological son of Marcus Thorne and his late wife, Isabella Rossi-Thorne. Then her gaze hardened as she turned it on Gideon Sharp. In my years on this bench, I have seen greed, deceit, and malice. What I witnessed today from your counsel, Mr. Thorne, was a callous disregard for the truth in favor of a swift victory. She then looked at Chloe, and her voice warmed. And from you, Ms. Evans, I have witnessed a level of integrity and loyalty that is nothing short of heroic. You did not bring a lawsuit. You delivered a legacy. Your friend would be immeasurably proud. This case is dismissed. The motion to countersue is denied with extreme prejudice. She banged the gavel. It echoed like a final, definitive punctuation mark on the entire ordeal. The spell was broken by the one sound in the room that was pure and innocent. Awakened by the emotional crescendo, baby, Leo began to cry. It was that sound that reached Marcus through his fog of grief. He lifted his head, his face a wreck of tears and disbelief and a dawning, terrifying wonder. He looked past everyone, his eyes locking onto the squirming bundle in Chloe's arms. Slowly, as if his limbs belonged to someone else, he stood. Every eye in the courtroom followed him. The sound of his expensive leather shoes on the marble floor was the only sound. He was no longer a billionaire walking out of a legal victory. He was a man walking through the rubble of his life toward the only thing that remained. He stopped directly in front of Chloe. She looked up at him, her own face a mixture of fear, relief, and a deep, sad compassion for his pain. "May I?" His voice was a raw whisper, a plea. Chloe gave a slight trembling nod. With the utmost care, as if transferring a priceless, fragile treasure, she placed the baby into his father's arms. The warmth, the weight, it was real. Marcus looked down at his son. He saw the tiny, furrowed brow, the small, pursed lips that were the perfect echo of Isabella's when she was concentrating. He saw the wisp of dark hair, and he knew instinctively that it would feel just like hers had when he used to run his fingers through it. With a trembling finger, he traced the baby's soft cheek. Leo's crying subsided, and his deep, dark eyes opened, staring up at the stranger holding him. And in their depths, Marcus saw it. A curiosity, a flicker of light, a connection that transcended DNA and science. He felt a presence. He felt her. He pulled the baby close, burying his face in the soft blanket, and a final shuddering sob escaped him. But this one was different. It was not the sound of grief. It was the sound of a long frozen river finally breaking, of a heart, shattered and empty, beginning to fill. In the middle of the silent courtroom, he whispered the name for the first time, tasting it on his lips like a prayer. Leo. In the end, it wasn't the lawyers or the evidence that won the day, but the enduring power of a love that refused to be silenced by death. Marcus Thorne, guided by his late wife's final words, embraced his new role as a father, finding in his son Leo not an echo of his sorrow, but a symphony of a future Isabella had so carefully composed for him. Chloe Evans was hailed not as a fraud, but as a hero, a testament to loyalty and friendship. Marcus established a new wing of the Arts Foundation in her name, ensuring her selfless act would be honored forever. The story of the billionaire, the baby, and the letter from beyond the grave serves as a powerful reminder that the greatest truths aren't always found in facts and figures, but are written on the human heart. If this story moved you, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share it with someone who appreciates a story of love against all odds, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that will capture your heart and soul. Click the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for listening.